You're listening to the Two-Man Advantage. Welcome to the Two-Man Advantage. I'm your host, Darrin Carlo, along with Mr. Kevin McShan, coming live from Two-Man Advantage Studios. Mr. Kevin McShan, how are you, sir?
I'm good. It's been a rainy and soggy couple of days, but we're dry in the studio and ready to talk some sports this afternoon. So I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So speaking of sports, let's talk about those coming up and down the roller coaster that is the Detroit Tigers. Looked pretty good over the weekend, taking 2 out of 3 from the Cleveland Indians. Justin Verlander making his first official start with the Tigers on Saturday. Went 5 innings, did decent. Didn't get the win, though, but all around, he looked good.
Well, he did, considering that it was his first start, and obviously they need him to return to form if they're going to make any sort of damage in the playoffs. Getting 5 innings out of him, probably as good as they could have hoped for. I know that they were hoping to get 100 pitches out of him. They didn't get that far down the road. Sadly, the bullpen gave the lead up over the weekend, so he wasn't able to win. But all things considered, I thought it was a solid first start. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. So it gives the Tigers something to build on.
Absolutely, you said it right there, Kevin. It gives them something to build on, especially now. I think they're slowly coming in. They're getting more healthy. Victor Martinez started his rehab assignment over there in Toledo, so he should be back soon. And also Bruce Rondon hopefully gets well soon, so he can help out that ailing bullpen that the Tigers do have. But I want to switch gears really quick, and it's still on baseball. Let's talk about those scorching red hot Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, they've won 10 in a row.
10 in a row, and they're going for their franchise record tonight. Just tell me about something about this team that they have some talent, they have some pop in their bats, they have some pop in that lineup. But tell me about what does this team do well that I think all the pieces are moving at the same time. They get pitching and hitting and great defense over there.
Well, I think it's finally coming together. I mean, it took John Given some time to find the footing with this particular bunch. I think Donaldson has been a catalyst for them. Russell Martin provides them with a veteran presence that I don't think the Blue Jays have had in the past. So I think the answer to your question is just better leadership all around. We knew that the Blue Jays could hit the baseball, but I also think with the emergence of their offense as a whole, they're getting better contributions out of their younger players like Devin Travis and Mark Burley is solidifying their pitching staff. So the long, short answer to your question is better leadership all around, and I think all the pieces are finally meshing together for Toronto, and it's good to see because Toronto hasn't really made the playoffs. It's been in the playoffs in a long time, and the key for them, just like the Tigers, is consistency. How long can they sustain this over the long period of time?
Now you talk about consistency, and that brings up an important part because we see these Blue Jays have these runs. They had one in May of last year where they wrapped off 7 or 8 games in a row. This time they're up to 10. Is this just one of those incredible hot streaks that we see during a regular season, or is this something serious where they can keep the momentum and maybe challenge for a playoff spot or a division title?
Well, as we mentioned last week, the AL East isn't particularly the hardest division in baseball. But when you look at it, I think baseball is a game of ebb and flows. I mean, they play 162, and as long as they can ride the hot streak of consistency, as you mentioned before, this will be they're going for their 11th straight win. So I think there is something in the air for the Blue Jays. I mean, Carlo has been a nice player for them. Devin Travis, which they got from the Tigers in the Anthony Ghost trade. And as I mentioned before, the veteran leadership is something that I think the Blue Jays haven't had before. And I do think Jose Bautista, obviously hitting the baseball, he's always been there, and Edwin Encarnacion sort of spurs their offensive lineup. But I do think the Blue Jays have a shot, particularly because I don't trust the Yankees. The Red Sox didn't look all that well over the weekend when they played Toronto. So I think the Blue Jays are like a handful of other teams that have a core of players, and we'll see where the chips fall in September and October.
All right. So it's a exciting time, baseball season, and also with the rest of the major sports, the NBA Finals and the NHL Finals are neck and neck right now. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and how LeBron is carrying one team on his back. But yeah.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Two-Man Advantage podcast. I'm Darrin and Carlo, along with Mr. Kevin McShan, coming to you live from the Two-Man Advantage studios, talking about NBA Finals. Those Golden State Warriors are one win away from hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy.
First time in 40 years.
In 40 years, it's a big moment. Kevin, the Cavs played last night against the Warriors. Another phenomenal performance by LeBron James. Another triple-double for LeBron James. Basically carrying the team on his back. That he does. But is that enough? Can one superstar, the greatest player pretty much playing in the game today, can he defeat an entire team, Kevin McShan?
Well, I think this about the NBA Finals. I think that the injuries, I should say, to both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love certainly have impacted this series. I mean, you don't count on your starting point guard blowing out his kneecap at the onset of the series. And I do think, listen, LeBron's playing 40 to 44 minutes each game. I think
he's shooting about 50 times a game. He's putting the ball up.
Well, I mean, for this team, I mean, that's what he has to do. I mean, they're playing with glue and paste to put this thing together. I think Tristan Thompson is a Canadian boy. He's from Toronto. Has had a good series, offensively rebounding the basketball. But to answer your original question, I just don't think Cleveland's got enough in the arsenal with their current roster to overcome what the Warriors have. I mean, the Warriors are a versatile group, and I do think that when it's all said and done, they may win tomorrow night because it's a home game. But I don't foresee Cleveland winning, and it's really a shame in the fact that this series isn't as good as it could be. I mean, it's. They've received the best rating since 2004 for this NBA final. But I do think that we're being cheated a little bit just because Cleveland doesn't have a full arsenal of players.
Right. And you bring up this was the most rated series since 2004. Speaking of which, do you know what today is?
June 15th.
That's right. Back in 2004, this was the day the Pistons won their third NBA championship in 2004. Beating those Lakers.
We've come a long way since then.
That's right. So that brings up an interesting point. You see, let's take that series, for example. Now you have these high-powered Lakers. You had Shaq, you had Kobe, you had Karl Malone, you had Gary Payton. You had pretty much an all-star team on one side versus a bunch of guys who can play well as a team together. And obviously the team wins over superstars. And I think that's going to be like setting for the whole. You know what I really think about this series is that it's going to go 7 games. It has to go 7 games for the NBA's sake and for the whole LeBron sake. Let's say if Cleveland wins, all the LeBron haters, they got to give him some respect. He pretty much won an NBA championship on his own.
Well, with this roster, I mean, he's playing with
Dellavedova?
well,
Who? Yeah, Dellavedova. No one has ever heard of him.
well, he's playing with secondary players.
Exactly.
I mean, if he does somehow come back, I guess I should say, if the Cavs come back and win this not only might be the most astonishing NBA Finals win in recent memory for Cleveland, their first major championship since 1964, but for LeBron's purposes, I think this might be the finest achievement of his career based on the roster he's currently playing with and the roster that is currently constituted for Cleveland, because really before the series, unless you're an avid Cavs fan, you really probably didn't know who Matthew Dellavedova or any of these role players for Cleveland are.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't think Cleveland's going to win, but if they do, they should build a bronze statue of LeBron everywhere he goes.
I think it's already up, but this one will just make it bigger, I guess, for everything. Because let's imagine if Jordan had to do this. Jordan had help. He had Pippen. He had Rodman. He had guys who can rely on. But LeBron has nobody. He's out there by himself, touching the ball every trip down the court. And either people hate that about him or they love it, that this guy, he's getting paid all this money. He wants to do everything he can to bring a title back to his hometown. Now, you got to respect him for trying that, but I think the Golden State Warriors, I think that everyone on that side is just too strong, and especially Stephen Curry. That kid's just amazing. He is the best shooter in the NBA, without a doubt.
Well, he had his best game. Game 5. I mean, he had 37 points and 11 rebounds, or 11 assists, sorry. He had his best game in this series because, quite honestly, he hadn't been playing all that well. And just a final note on the finals itself, the insertion of Andre Iguodala for Andrew Bogut is what turned this series around.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
Steve Kerr decided to play small ball and speed up the tempo. And since the insertion of Iguodala in the starting lineup, I mean, Bogut hasn't played nearly at all, and they've found the formula, and putting Iguodala on LeBron has certainly played dividends. And I do think Cleveland will win Game 6, but I don't think they can win twice on the road. So.
All right, so there you go. Kevin McShan staking the Golden State Warriors in 7. I'm going to take the Warriors, but I'm going to say that they finish it off in Cleveland. Just the ultimate salt in the wound of all the Cavs fans out there and the bandwagon Cavs fans out there. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little NHL hockey playoffs. Stick around. It's hockey time. It's playoff time. It's Stanley Cup Finals time. The Cup is in the building tonight. Will the Chicago Blackhawks finally finish off those pesky Tampa Bay Lightnings and hoist Lord Stanley's Cup for the third time in 6 years? They hold a Series 3-2 lead with Games 6 going down in Chicago tonight. Mr. Kevin McShan, hockey expert that you are, what can the Lightning do to force a Game 7?
Speed up the tempo in terms of are getting into Chicago zone more quicker. And I do think that Chicago has a formula, as you had mentioned before, that they've been down this road. And especially in hockey, you don't want to force a game 7 because anything can happen.
If you're a player, no. If you're a fan, yes.
If you're a player, you want to end it, especially on your home ice
Right.
For game 6. But I would ask you this: what do you think the inexperience of Tampa has played a role in Chicago taking this lead, or what do you think has given the Blackhawks the edge in this series?
Well, obviously, let's start with the Blackhawks. Obviously, the experience and them having those same core players, year in, year out, playoff experience after playoff experience, cup after cup. They have that without a doubt. No question. They're favored in that category. But when you get to the Stanley Cup final, after you've been grueling for over a month in the playoffs, playing sudden death games, sudden death overtimes, you just got to throw it out the window. It's all about the cup. It's all about that one game. Win that game, Tampa, and you're fine. Go back to a nice, sunny, most likely not rainy city that is Chicago. I don't know what the weather's like over there, but they've been down before. They were down 3-2 to the Wings.
They were, yeah.
Everyone thought that they were done. I was at that game where they came back and they tied it up. So this Tampa Bay Lightning team does not say die because, obviously it starts at the top with leadership and all the way from Steve Yzerman to the head coach to the captain on the ice and Steve Stamkos. These group of guys are just, they work their ass off and you can see it. The only thing I have to say, don't turn the puck over because that's what Chicago does. And that's how Chicago gets those goals and scoring opportunities by forcing Tampa to turn the puck over. They pressure them when they come out of the Blues, come out of their own end, and they're very strong on the forward check. So Tampa, if you take care of the puck, score first, and hunker down, and if Ben Bishop has to play the game of his life, that's the way to force the game 7. And upset special, I'm taking the Tampa Bay Lightning in 7 games, Kevin. 7 games.
That would be an upset special. Also, just Joe Quinville, I know he's got ties to the local area.
So that's right, local boy, Windsor boy.
I know that a lot of people here in Windsor and Essex will be pulling for the Blackhawks for that very reason. But my final question for you in regards to this topic is, when Steve Yzerman took over the Lightning, he said he wanted to build this from the ground up, and it appears that he's done that. So looking at the series, if Tampa does not come back and win, what do you think they can take out of this series and this season as a whole?
No, absolutely. You take away experience. You went to the Stanley Cup Finals with a young, talented team. That's got to be one of the great morale boosters and the experience that you would need. Yeah, of course, you want to win the cup. Obviously, that's priority number 1. But let's say if you don't win the cup, you're going up against a dynasty that is the Chicago Blackhawks. And all these young players, then like you said, they built a rebuild. And that's how they do it. All those players, most of those players, were drafted by them. And that's a kudos to Steve Yzerman.
Player development
and scouting to all those Kucherov and Andre Palat, all those guys, in the right system with the right coach, a lot of teams can succeed in this league. And speaking as a Leaf fan, hopefully that works for the Toronto Maple Leafs in their quest to rebuild, and hopefully they can strike while the iron's hot when it comes to the draft coming up after the Stanley Cup Finals.
And just coming full circle, I mean, if it went the other way for the Wings in Game 7 against Tampa Bay, we may have a totally different scenario with Babcock, right? So
exactly. Well, and that's another thing because Wings they were a lot older team, and I get the feeling that Babcock wasn't the coach for everyone on that team. You know, he has a certain coaching style that some players respond well to, and other players don't. So maybe that's why they just didn't put their best foot forward when they played Tampa in Game 7. But give Tampa credit; they have been there through thick and thin, good times and bad times. This team doesn't know the word quit, and you can see it on their face and how hard they play. I really think that Chicago hold up on the bubbly tonight. This game is going to number 7. 7 games in Tampa, and I think Tampa is going to steal the Stanley Cup this year. I hate to say it because I have good friends who are diehard Chicago Blackhawks fans, and they told me, this is like, every time you cheer for a team that is playing Chicago, Chicago wins the series. So I may be helping them, or I might be jinxing them. Whatever happens, I like Tampa. I like the way they play. I like their toughness, and I like John Cooper as a head coach. I think he did a phenomenal job. And also, for being a Leaf fan, I love Steve Yzerman. He's just one of the best all-around players and good guys in the NHL.
All
right. Are we all done there, Kevin?
Yeah, I think we're.
Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts would be the NBA Finals will probably go 7 games. I do think that Golden State will win. I just think Golden State has more depth than Cleveland's playing with a shorter deck. So I do think the NBA Finals are going to go 7 games, and Chicago needs to win Game 6. If they want to win the cup, because Game 7
is in Tampa.
Yeah.
So he's picking. So you got the Hawks in 6 and Golden State in 7.
Golden State in 7. I just think they've got, as David Blatt said, he's got either 20 points in both 2 players, either on the bench, in strict clothes, or in the hospital. So I just think that. Golden State will win. I do think Cleveland, coming full circle, will go back to the finals next year once all their players are healthy. But for this season, I do think Golden State will win. And my final question for you, as we wrap this up: if LeBron does lose, this will be his 6th time in the finals, but he'll
fifth time,
but he'll be 2-4 as in the finals. So I'm wondering if he loses, what does that do to his legacy?
His legacy will always be about 6 championships. So as long as he wins those championships, it doesn't matter how many times you make it to the finals. You just win those championships.
Okay.
All right. Well,
thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Two Man Advantage. Check us out on the website, www.twomanadvantagepodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at 2MA Sports. And you can follow Kevin. He's everywhere. He puts up great stuff all day and every week. So make sure to listen to this podcast, comment, subscribe. Until next time, just win, baby.